He thought she was ruin. He thought she was dead weight in his ascent to the top of the New York skyline, so Dominic Vane, the ruthless heir to the Vane Empire, cut her loose with a check and a cold stare. 2 years later, sitting in the city's most exclusive restaurant with his high-maintenance mistress, Dominic looked up and felt his blood turn to ice. There she was, not broken, not crying. She was glowing, draped in silk, undeniably pregnant, and holding the hand of the one man Dominic feared, his biggest rival. Dominic Vane traded his soul for a merger, but he forgot one thing. True value always appreciates over time. The air inside Le Bernardin smelled of truffle reduction and old money. It was the kind of silence that cost $300 a plate, a hushed atmosphere where the clinking of silver against bone china sounded like gunshots. Dominic Vane swirled the Pinot Noir in his glass, watching the crimson liquid coat the sides. Across from him, Tiffany St. Clair was talking. She had been talking for 20 minutes, a ceaseless stream of consciousness about the incompetence of a personal shopper and the absolute necessity of securing a vintage Hermes Kelly bag for the upcoming charity season. "Dom, are you even listening?" Tiffany snapped, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the tablecloth. She was beautiful, objectively. Blonde, statuesque, with the kind of sharp features that looked excellent on magazine covers and intimidating in person. She was also the daughter of a senator, a strategic alliance that had helped Dominic secure the zoning rights for his new Hudson Yards skyscraper. "I'm listening, Tiffany," Dominic said, his voice a low baritone that usually commanded boardrooms. Tonight, it sounded weary. "The Kelly bag, the shopper, the injustice of it all." Tiffany narrowed her eyes. "You're being dismissive. You know, my father was asking about the merger timeline today. I told him you were distracted. It was a veiled threat. It was always a threat with her." Dominic forced a smile, the one that had graced the cover of Forbes last month under the headline, "The Cold King of Real Estate." "I'm not distracted, Tiff. I'm just hungry." He signaled for the waiter, but his hand froze in midair. The heavy glass doors at the entrance of the restaurant swung open. The Maître d'Art, a man known for his imperious sneer, practically melted into a puddle of obsequious charm. He bowed lower than Dominic had ever seen him bow. Walking through the doors was Lucas Montgomery. Dominic's jaw tightened. Lucas was the CEO of Montgomery & Co., a private equity firm that had been quietly buying up the debt of Dominic's competitors. Lucas was everything Dominic wasn't. Charming where Dominic was cold, philanthropic where Dominic was ruthless, and dangerously liquid where Dominic was currently leveraged. But it wasn't Lucas who made Dominic's heart stop. It was the woman on his arm. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that clung to her curves, off the shoulder, exposing creamy skin that shimmered under the ambient lighting. Her hair, once a messy chestnut wave he used to tangle his fingers in, was now styled in a sleek, sophisticated chignon held in place by a diamond pin that caught the light. It was Madeline. Madeline Reeves. The woman Dominic had dated for 3 years. The woman who had made him coffee every morning in a mug that said "World's Okayest Boyfriend." The woman he had discarded like a used napkin the moment his father told him he needed a serious partner to inherit the company. But she wasn't just Madeline anymore. She carried herself with a regality he didn't recognize, and Dominic's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the base of the table. She was heavily pregnant. The sound of breaking glass silenced the nearby tables. Red wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth, looking like a crime scene. "Dominic! What the hell?" Tiffany shrieked, jumping back as a droplet hit her dress. Dominic didn't hear her. He couldn't hear anything over the roaring in his ears. He stared at Madeline's stomach. She was at least 7 months along. As the busboys rushed to clean the mess, Madeline turned. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the commotion. She saw the spilled wine. She saw Tiffany wiping her dress with a napkin, looking furious. And then, her gaze locked with Dominic's. He expected hate. He expected tears. He expected her to look away in shame. Instead, Madeline Reeves looked at him with total, crushing indifference. Her eyes slid over him, as if he were a piece of furniture. Then she turned back to Lucas Montgomery, who placed a protective hand on the swell of her belly and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. It was a soft, genuine laugh. The kind Dominic hadn't heard in 2 years, the kind he realized with a sudden violent pang of nausea. He had murdered. "Sir!" The waiter was hovering, terrified. "Sir, are you all right?" Dominic stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. I need the restroom." He brushed past the waiter, past Tiffany's indignant cries, and walked toward the back. But he didn't go to the restroom. He stood in the shadow of the hallway, watching Lucas pull out the chair for Madeline. He watched the way Lucas treated her like she was made of precious glass. 7 months, Dominic calculated, his mind racing like a ticker tape. "It's been 2 years. It can't be mine. It's impossible." But the curve of her jaw, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, it was all so painfully familiar. "Who is she?" Tiffany appeared behind him, her voice like a jagged knife. She had followed him. She was looking at Madeline too, her eyes narrowing. "That's the girl, isn't it? The barista, or whatever she was, the one you dumped for me." "She wasn't a barista," Dominic gritted out. "She was an archivist." "Whatever," Tiffany scoffed. "She looks fat. And who is she with? Is that Lucas Montgomery? What is she doing with a billionaire?" "She's not fat, Tiffany," Dominic snapped, his voice rising. "She's pregnant." Tiffany froze. She looked at Madeline again. Really looked at her. Then she looked at Dominic, a cruel smirk forming on her red lips. "Pregnant?" Tiffany laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Well, isn't that sweet? The little mouse found a new sugar daddy. I wonder if Lucas knows she's just a gold digger you threw away." "Shut up," Dominic warned, his hands balling into fists. "Don't tell me to shut up," Tiffany hissed. "You're making a scene. Go sit down. They're bringing a new tablecloth. And fix your tie. You look like you've seen a ghost." Dominic looked back at the table. Madeline was sipping water. Lucas was holding her hand across the table, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. They looked like a fortress. Unreachable. Dominic Vane was a man who owned skyscrapers, islands, and politicians, but standing there in the hallway of Lebanadin, he felt like a beggar looking through a window at a feast he was forbidden from tasting. The drive home to the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was silent. Tiffany was furiously texting on her phone, the glow of the screen illuminating her scowl. Dominic stared out the window at the blurred lights of Manhattan, but his mind was trapped in a rainy Tuesday evening 2 years ago. The flashback. It was a small apartment in Brooklyn. It smelled of vanilla candles and old paper Madeline's scent. Dominic was standing by the door, his tailored Brioni suit feeling like armor against the cozy, cluttered warmth of her home. "I don't understand," Madeline had said. She wasn't crying yet. She was just confused. She was holding a spatula. She was been making lasagna. His favorite. "It's just not working, Maddie." Dominic had lied, checking his Rolex. He had a meeting with Tiffany's father in an hour to finalize the initial terms of the alliance. "We're on different paths. You want this?" He gestured vaguely at the comfortable lived-in apartment. "And I have a legacy to secure." A legacy. Madeline put the spatula down. Her hands were shaking. "Dom, we've been together for 3 years. You told me you loved this apartment. You told me you felt safe here." "Feelings change," he said coldly. He had practiced this tone in the mirror. He had to be brutal. If he gave her hope, she would wait. And he couldn't have her waiting. "My father is stepping down. The board is volatile. I need a partner who understands my world. Someone who can navigate the politics. And I can't." Madeline stepped forward. "I have a master's in art history, Dominic. I'm not an idiot. I can learn." "It's not about what you can learn. It's about who you are," he said, delivering the fatal blow. "You're sweet, Maddie. But you're small. You don't have the pedigree. You don't have the connections. You're ordinary." That was the word that broke her. He saw the light go out in her hazel eyes. Ordinary. Here, Dominic said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. This is a check for $50,000. It covers the rent for the rest of the lease and— Get out, she whispered. Maddie, be reasonable. Get out, she screamed, grabbing the check and tearing it into shreds, throwing the confetti at his chest. I don't want your money, Dominic. I never wanted your money. I just wanted you. He had walked out. He didn't look back. He told himself he was doing her a favor. He was setting her free to find someone ordinary, someone who would appreciate lasagna and vanilla candles. He didn't know then that she had a doctor's appointment scheduled for the next morning. He didn't know she was going to tell him about the baby that night over dinner. Present day, the limousine came to a halt. The doorman opened the door. Dominic, Tiffany said as they entered the gold-plated elevator. I looked it up. Dominic blinked, shaking off the memory. Looked what up? Madeline Reeves, Tiffany said, scrolling on her phone, or should I say, Madeline Reeves Montgomery. No, wait, they aren't married. But the press is calling her the curator of Silicon Alley. What are you talking about? She's not just an archivist anymore, darling, Tiffany said, her voice dripping with venomous intrigue, apparently 6 months after you dumped her. She discovered a lost Da Vinci sketch in a estate sale in upstate New York. Bought it for $50, authenticated it, and sold it for $12 million. Dominic felt the floor drop out from under him. $12 million? And who do you think bought it? Tiffany smirked. Lucas Montgomery. That's how they met. She used the money to start a boutique art investment firm. She's not just dating him, Dominic. She's advising his entire portfolio. She's worth millions on her own. Dominic leaned against the elevator wall. He felt sick. He had called her small. He had called her ordinary. And, Tiffany added, zooming in on a paparazzi photo, the gossip blogs are saying the baby is due in 2 months. That means she did the math. Dominic did the math. 7 months pregnant, Dominic whispered, 2 years apart. It's definitely Lucas's, Tiffany said, sounding relieved. Thank God. Imagine if you had a bastard running around. It would ruin the Senate campaign my father is planning for you. But Dominic wasn't listening. He was thinking about the way Lucas looked at her. He was thinking about the Da Vinci. Madeline had always had an eye for hidden value. She could see things others missed. She had seen the good in Dominic when everyone else saw a shark. And now that she was gone, Dominic realized that the good had left with her. He walked into his penthouse, poured a glass of whiskey, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, in a warmer, brighter home, Madeline was sleeping. He took out his phone. He knew he shouldn't. It was suicide, but he opened his contacts, scrolled down to the blocked list, and found her number. He unblocked it. He typed, I saw you tonight. He stared at the blinking cursor. Then he deleted it. He threw the phone onto the couch. He didn't just want her back. He wanted to destroy the man who was living the life Dominic had been too cowardly to choose. Madeline Reeves sat on the edge of the king-size bed in Lucas's townhouse in the West Village. The room was soft, decorated in creams and light oaks, a stark contrast to the cold chrome and glass of Dominic's world. She rubbed Biowall over her stomach, feeling the baby kick. A sharp, strong kick. He's active tonight, Lucas said, walking in from the bathroom. He was wearing flannel pajama bottoms and a t-shirt. He didn't look like a billionaire shark. He looked like a man who was tired but happy. She, Madeline corrected, smiling. I have a feeling it's a she. Lucas sat behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. Did seeing him upset you? Madeline paused. She looked at their reflection in the mirror across the room. I thought it would. I spent a year dreading that moment, rehearsing what I would say, screaming at him, crying, throwing wine. And nothing, Madeline said softly. I looked at him and I just felt sad. Not for me, for him. He looked miserable, Lucas. He looked like he was in a cage he built himself. Lucas kissed her neck. He made his choice, Maddie. He made his choice, Maddie. He chose the merger. He chose the senator's daughter. I know. Are you going to tell him? Lucas asked. The question hung heavy in the air. Madeline stiffened. Tell him what? That you kept the voicemail, Lucas said gently. The one from the night you found out. Madeline closed her eyes. It wasn't the baby. The baby was Lucas's. They had met 6 months after the breakup, during the whirlwind of the Da Vinci discovery. They had fallen in love fast and hard. This child was a product of healing, not heartbreak. But there was a secret. A secret that connected her to Dominic in a way a child never could. No, Madeline said firmly. That part of my life is over. Dominic Vane is a competitor now. Nothing more. He's going to come for you, Lucas warned. I saw his eyes tonight. He's a man who realizes he threw away a winning lottery ticket. He's not used to losing, and he's definitely not used to losing to me. Let him come, Madeline said, a dangerous glint entering her eyes, the steel that Dominic had claimed she lacked. He thinks I'm still the girl who makes lasagna and waits by the phone. He doesn't know who I am now. She stood up, wincing slightly as her back popped. I have the final appraisal for the Met Gala auction tomorrow. The Vane Foundation is the biggest bidder. Lucas raised an eyebrow. You're going to be in the same room with him again. I'm the head curator for the event, Lucas. I can't hide. Besides, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I want him to see. I want him to see exactly what ordinary looks like when it's wearing $1 million of jewelry and holding the gavel. Try enter. Meanwhile, at Vane Enterprises HQ, it was 3 a.m. The office was deserted except for the cleaners and Dominic Vane. He was sitting at his desk, surrounded by financial reports, but on his main screen the spreadsheets were minimized. In their place was a dossier. Subject, Lucas Montgomery. Assets, $4.2 billion. Primary weakness, sentimentality. Dominic picked up his office phone and dialed a number that didn't have a name, just a secure line code. It's Vane, Dominic said when the voice answered. Mr. Vane. It's late. I want a forensic audit on Montgomery & Co., Dominic said, his voice flat and deadly. I want to know every skeleton in his closet. I want to know about his previous relationships. I want to know about the art deal with Madeline Reeves. Was it legitimate? Or was it a pail? You're looking for dirt on the girl? No, Dominic said. I'm looking for a way to separate them. If Lucas Montgomery goes down for fraud or insider trading, she'll have nowhere to go. And the objective, sir, the objective, Dominic said, looking at the photo of Madeline he had printed out from the gala guest list, is acquisition. Hostile or otherwise. He hung up. He opened his drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring. A modest diamond solitaire. He had bought it 3 years ago, intending to propose before his father intervened. He hadn't thrown it away. He spun the ring on his desk. You're not in love with him, Maddie, he whispered to the empty room. You're just hurt, and I'm going to fix it. But Dominic didn't know that the war he was starting wasn't just about love. It was about to uncover a corporate conspiracy that linked Tiffany's father, the senator, to the very real estate deal that had made Dominic a billionaire. And Madeline Reeves held the key. The following morning, the sun over Central Park was deceptively bright. Madeline sat in her office at Reeves & Associates, a boutique firm nestled in a brownstone on the Upper East Side. The walls were lined with contemporary abstract pieces, a signal to her clients that she understood the future of value. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, walked in with an iPad. Maddie, we have a problem with the gala seating chart. Madeline didn't look up from her tea. Let me guess, Tiffany St. Clair called and demanded to be moved? Worse, Leo grimaced. The Vane Foundation just doubled their donation for the evening. As a platinum benefactor, Dominic Vane is contractually entitled to the Founders Table. Madeline stopped typing. The Founders Table was the centerpiece of the event. It was where she, as the lead curator, had to sit. He bought the seat next to me, Madeline stated. Essentially, Leo said, and Tiffany is seated on his other side. Lucas is seated. Well, he's at the table, but on the opposite end. He's trying to corner me, Madeline realized. She felt a flicker of the old anxiety, the desire to shrink away. But then she felt the baby kick again. No, not this time. Let him sit there, Madeline said, taking a sip of tea. If he wants a front row seat, let's give him a show. Also, Leo hesitated, a gift arrived. For the baby. He pointed to a large, extravagant basket in the corner of the room. It was overflowing with cashmere blankets, silver rattles, and a massive teddy bear from FAO Schwartz. There was no card, just a tag that read, "For the future." It was a power move. It was aggressive. It was Dominic. Send it back, Madeline said immediately. Maddie, it's like $5,000 of stuff. Donate it to the shelter on 4th Street, she corrected. Do not let that enter my house. Just then, the glass door to her office opened. It wasn't a client. It was Tiffany St. Clair. Tiffany looked out of place in the artistic sanctuary. She was wearing a sharp Chanel power suit and sunglasses indoors. She didn't knock. She marched straight to Madeline's desk. Leo, give us a minute, Madeline said calmly. Leo nodded and scurried out, closing the door. Madeline folded her hands over her stomach. To what do I owe the pleasure, Tiffany? The gala isn't until tonight. Tiffany took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked less like a predator and more like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. Stay away from him, Tiffany said, her voice trembling. I assume you mean Dominic. I assume you mean Dominic. I assure you I have no intention of going near him. Don't lie to me. Tiffany slammed her hand on the desk. He's obsessed. He had his security team run a background check on your boyfriend at 3 a.m. He's looking for leverage. He thinks if he destroys Lucas, you'll come crawling back. Madeline felt a chill run down her spine. Why are you telling me this? Because, Tiffany hissed, leaning in. I'm pregnant. Madeline's eyes widened. What? I took a test this morning, Tiffany whispered, tears welling up. It's barely been 6 weeks. I haven't told him yet. I can't tell him. Why not? Because he doesn't love me, Tiffany cried out, the mask completely slipping. He never did. He looks at me and sees a merger. He looks at you and sees... God, I don't know what he sees, but it's real. If he knows I'm pregnant, he'll marry me out of duty. He'll resent me and the child forever. I don't want that life. Madeline looked at the woman who had helped ruin her life 2 years ago. She should hate her. She should laugh, but Madeline knew the pain of loving Dominic Vane. It was a lonely, cold place. Tiffany, Madeline said softly, you need to leave him. I can't, Tiffany wiped her face. My father, the Dium. It's all tied together. If I leave, the zoning permits for the Hudson project get pulled. Dominic loses billions. He'll destroy my family. Madeline stood up. Her mind was racing. The zoning permits. The senator. Wait, Madeline said. The Minnick got the zoning permits after he started dating you. Yes, that was the deal. My dad pushed them through the city council in exchange for Dominic funding his re-election PAC via a shell company. The room went silent. Tiffany realized what she had just said. She covered her mouth. You can't repeat that. That's illegal. That's bribery. Madeline looked at the basket of toys in the corner. For the future. Dominic wasn't just a heartbroken ex. He was a criminal. And Lucas's firm, Montgomery & Co., had just bought the debt of the construction company building that tower. If the permits were illegal, the tower was illegal. If the tower halted, the debt would become toxic. Lucas would lose everything. Dominic wasn't just trying to steal Madeline back. He was unknowingly handing her a grenade that could blow them all up. Tiffany, Madeline said, her voice steady, you're going to go to the gala tonight. You're going to smile. And you're going to meet me in the powder room at 9 p.m. Why? Tiffany asked, terrified. Because, Madeline said, picking up her phone to text Lucas, I think it's time we stopped letting the men decide our futures. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed into a kaleidoscope of gold leaf and flashbulbs. It was the kind of night where the air conditioning fought a losing battle against the collective body heat of New York's elite, and the scent of expensive perfume was thick enough to taste. Dominic Vane stepped onto the red carpet, the flashes of the paparazzi blinding him. On his arm, Tiffany St. Clair wore a silver sheath dress that looked like liquid mercury. She was smiling, the practiced frozen smile of a politician's daughter, but her grip on Dominic's bicep was bruising. "Remember," Dominic muttered, not moving his lips as they posed for Vogue. "We are the power couple. Don't look so terrified." "I'm not terrified, Dominic," Tiffany whispered back, her voice tight. "I'm nauseous. And I hate you. Smile, darling. Your father's poll numbers depend on it." They moved inside, ascending the great hall stairs. Dominic scanned the crowd. He didn't care about the movie stars or the models. He was hunting. He found them near the Temple of Dendor. Madeline was impossible to miss. She wore a bespoke gown of emerald silk, cut loosely to accommodate her pregnancy but structured to look like high fashion. She looked like a fertility goddess amidst a sea of starving socialites. Lucas stood beside her, wearing a midnight blue tuxedo that perfectly matched the velvet dress she had worn the night before. Dominic felt that familiar, hot coal of jealousy burn in his chest. He steered Tiffany toward them. "Lucas," Dominic said, his voice slicing through the ambient chatter, "and Madeline. You look healthy." Madeline turned. She held a glass of sparkling water. Her gaze was cool, assessing. "Dominic." "Tiffany. Lovely to see you." "Is it?" Dominic stepped closer, encroaching on her personal space. "I heard a rumor you're auctioning off the Lieb diamond tonight. A bit ambitious for a small firm, isn't it?" "Ambition is only dangerous if you don't have the capital to back it up," Lucas interjected, stepping smoothly between Dominic and Madeline. "Fortunately, Madeline has plenty of backing." "For now," Dominic said, a cryptic smile playing on his lips. "Markets are volatile, Lucas. You never know when a sure thing turns toxic." The dinner chimes rang, saving them from a brawl. They moved to the founder's table. The seating chart was a masterpiece of cruelty. Dominic was seated directly to Madeline's right. Lucas was across the large round table, too far to intervene in a whisper. As the first course scallop ceviche with caviar was served, Dominic leaned in. "You're trembling," he murmured to Madeline. "I'm cold," she lied. She wasn't cold. She was terrified of the man he had become. "You know," Dominic said, picking up his fork, "I remember when you used to wear my oversized hoodies to watch movies. You were happier then. Simpler." "I was deluded then," Madeline corrected, keeping her eyes on her plate. "I thought I was with a man who had a heart. Turns out I was just a placeholder for an IPO. That's unfair." Dominic's voice dropped an octave, vibrating with intensity. "I made a mistake, Maddie. I panicked. The pressure from my father, it was immense. But I've fixed it. I'm fixing it." Madeline turned to him slowly. "What does that mean, Dominic?" Dominic took a sip of his wine, his eyes locking onto Lucas across the table. Lucas was laughing at something the mayor said. "It means," Dominic whispered, "that by tomorrow morning, Montgomery & Co. is going to face a very aggressive audit from the SEC. An anonymous source provided evidence of irregular trading patterns." Madeline's blood ran cold. "You wouldn't." "I would burn this whole city down to get you back," Dominic said, his face a mask of calm insanity. "Lucas will be tied up in litigation for years. His assets will be frozen. He won't be able to provide for you. Not the way I can." He reached under the table and placed his hand on her knee. "Come back to me, Maddie. I'll make the audit disappear. We can raise the baby together. It doesn't matter who the biological father is. Vein blood or not, I'll make him a king." Madeline felt sick. He wasn't just asking for a second chance. He was holding her life hostage. She looked across the table at Lucas. He didn't know. He was smiling at her, raising his glass in a silent toast. She looked at her watch. 8:55 p.m. "Excuse me," Madeline said, standing up abruptly. "I need the powder room." Dominic smirked, thinking he had won. "Don't take too long, darling. The main course is coming." Madeline walked as fast as her swollen ankles would allow toward the restrooms. She pushed open the heavy marble door. The room was empty, save for one person. Tiffany St. Clair was standing by the sinks, clutching her stomach, her face pale. "He knows something," Tiffany said without preamble. "My father called me 10 minutes ago. He said Dominic's lawyers have been asking strange questions about the zoning permits." "He doesn't know about the permits yet," Madeline said, locking the door. "He's attacking Lucas to get to me. He just told me he triggered an SEC audit." Tiffany gasped. "If he takes down Lucas, then the debt Lucas holds on Dominic's Hudson Yards project gets called in by the receivers." Madeline finished the thought. "Dominic thinks he's sniping Lucas. He doesn't realize he's shooting a hole in his own boat. If Montgomery & Co. collapses, the creditors will liquidate everything, including the loan that's keeping Dominic's skyscraper afloat." "So they both go down?" Tiffany asked. Mutually destruction," Madeline nodded. "And you and I get caught in the blast. Your father goes to jail for the bribery. My firm loses its biggest backer." The two women looked at each other in the mirror. One the mistress, one the ex. Both pregnant. Both trapped by the ego of the same man. "I have the emails," Tiffany whispered. Madeline froze. "What?" "Between my father and Dominic, the emails setting up the shell company for the bribe. I printed them out. I was going to use them as insurance in case Dominic tried to make me get an abortion." Tiffany reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded, thick envelope. Madeline took the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. "If I use this," Madeline said, "Dominic goes to prison. Your father goes to prison." "I don't care about my father," Tiffany said, tears streaming down her face. "He sold me to Dominic like a broodmare. I just want out. I want to keep my baby, and I want to disappear." Madeline looked at the envelope, then at Tiffany. "Go back to the table," Madeline commanded, her voice finding a new steely resonance. "Tell Dominic you're not feeling well and you're going home. Leave the rest to me." "What are you going to do?" Madeline opened her clutch and tucked the envelope inside, right next to her lipstick. "I'm going to teach Dominic Vane that some things can't be bought." The next morning, the financial world of New York woke up to a bloodbath. But it wasn't the one Dominic Vane had orchestrated. At 7 a.m., Dominic stood in his office, staring at the Bloomberg terminal. He was waiting for the news of the SEC raid on Lucas's firm. He was waiting for the stock price of Montgomery & Co. to plummet. Instead, the headline flashing in red across the screen was, "Vane Enterprises under investigation for zoning fraud." "What is this?" Dominic roared, throwing his coffee mug against the wall. Shattered ceramic rained down on the expensive Persian rug. His intercom buzzed. It was his secretary, her voice trembling. "Mr. Vane, there are agents from the FBI in the lobby. They have a warrant." Dominic fell back into his leather chair. FBI? That wasn't possible. The senator had covered the tracks. The shell company was impenetrable unless someone on the inside had talked. His phone rang. It was Lucas Montgomery. Dominic stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "You son of a batch. Good morning to you too, Dominic." Lucas's voice was calm, cheerful even. "I assume you've seen the news. You planted this," Dominic hissed. "You don't have proof. It's a smear campaign." "Actually, I didn't do anything," Lucas said. "I was busy preparing for an audit that you tried to trigger. By the way, my books are clean, unlike yours." "Who gave it to you?" Dominic demanded. "Who gave you the evidence?" "I didn't get the evidence, Dominic. The district attorney did. An anonymous courier dropped off a very interesting packet of emails last night. Emails between you and Senator St. Clair. Emails between you and Senator St. Clair. Dominic's vision blurred. Tiffany. It had to be. Or Madeline, Dominic whispered. She's a remarkable woman, isn't she? Lucas said, his voice hardening. You underestimated her, Dominic. You thought she was weak because she was kind. You forgot that she's an archivist. She knows that history always leaves a paper trail. I'll destroy you, Dominic threatened, though his voice lacked its usual power. I'll drag you down with me. You hold the debt on the Hudson Tower. If I go under, that debt is worthless. You'll lose millions. I sold the debt, Lucas said simply. Dominic froze. What? At the gala last night, while you were busy threatening Madeline, I was closing a deal with a Chinese conglomerate. I sold the Vane Enterprises debt package at 95 cents on the dollar. I'm out, Dominic. I'm completely liquid. Dominic felt the room spin. Lucas had outmaneuvered him. While Dominic was playing emotional checkers, Lucas and Madeline had been playing 4D chess. Why? Dominic asked, his voice breaking. Why go this far? Because you threatened my family, Lucas said, and nobody touches my family. The line went dead. Dominic looked up as the office doors burst open. Men in windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on the back marched in. Dominic Vane, the lead agent, barked. Stand up and place your hands behind your back. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, called tight and humiliating, Dominic saw movement by the door. Tiffany St. Clair was standing there. She wasn't crying. She was wearing a trench coat and carrying a suitcase. Tiffany, Dominic pleaded, call your father. Fix this. Tiffany looked at him with the same pitying expression one might give a dying animal. My father is already in custody, Dominic, she said quietly, and I'm moving to Paris. You can't leave, he rasped. The baby. Tiffany placed a hand on her stomach. My baby. Not yours. Not anymore. She turned and walked away, the sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor the last thing he heard before the agents shoved him toward the elevator. 3 days later. Madeline sat in her living room. The TV was on, muted. The news showed Dominic Vane being led out of the courthouse on bail, looking haggard, unshaven, and defeated. The Vane stock had crashed 60%. The board had voted to remove him as CEO that morning. He had lost his company. He had lost his reputation. He had lost his reputation. He had lost the women. It's over, Lucas said, walking in with 2 mugs of tea. He sat beside her, careful of her stomach. Is it? Madeline asked, looking at the fallen king on the screen. He's out on bail. He's finished, Maddie. He's facing 20 years. The senator is flipping on him to get a reduced sentence. Madeline took the tea. She should feel triumphant. She had won. But she just felt exhausted. I received a letter today, Madeline said, from him. Lucas tensed. He contacted you. It was hand-delivered by his lawyer. Is not a threat. She picked up a piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery from the coffee table. She read it aloud. Madeline, you were right. I was looking for value in all the wrong places. I spent my life building towers to look down on the world, and I missed the only thing that mattered was right in front of me. I signed the rights to the apartment in Brooklyn over to you. The one we lived in. I bought the building last year. I was going to demolish it. Now, it's yours. Do with it what you will. I won't bother you again. D. Lucas looked at the letter. He's trying to buy forgiveness. Maybe, Madeline said. Or maybe he's finally realizing that he's poor. He has billions, Lucas, but he's the poorest man I know. Suddenly, Madeline gasped. She grabbed her stomach, the mug slipping from her hand and splashing hot tea onto the rug. Maddie? Lucas was instantly on alert. What is it? Lucas, she breathed, her face contorted in pain. The water. It just broke. Lucas's eyes went wide. The corporate wars, the FBI, the millions of dollars, it all vanished in a second. Okay, he stammered, standing up. Okay, hospital, bag, car. Madeline laughed through a contraction, a sound of pure, unadulterated life. Yes, Lucas, in that order, inadulterated life. Yes, Lucas, in that order, as they rushed out of the townhouse, leaving the TV on, the image of Dominic Vane faded into the background. The story was no longer about him. The labor was nothing like the sanitized scenes in the movies. It was raw, exhausting, and stripped of all pretense. For 12 agonizing hours, Madeline Reeves fought through waves of pain that threatened to pull her under, her world narrowing down to the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the crushing grip of Lucas's hand. Lucas Montgomery, the man who moved billions with a phone call, was reduced to a terrifying helplessness. He wasn't checking his emails. He wasn't thinking about the markets. He was wiping sweat from Madeline's forehead with a cool cloth, whispering words of encouragement that she barely heard but desperately needed. He was entirely unshakably present in the messy, terrifying miracle of life. At 4:12 a.m., under the harsh, humming fluorescent lights of Lenox Hill Hospital, the struggle broke. A sharp, indignant cry pierced the sterile air, louder than the city traffic outside. "She's here," Lucas choked out, his voice cracking. Tears streamed openly down his face, unashamed. "Maddie, look, she's here." The doctor placed the infant on Madeline's chest. She was tiny, slippery, red-faced, and furious at the cold world she had just entered. But the moment Madeline touched her cheek, brushing a thumb over the damp skin, the crying stopped instantly. The baby opened her eyes. Dark, inquisitive eyes that seemed to hold an ancient, quiet wisdom. "Elena," Madeline whispered, testing the weight of the name on her tongue. It meant light. And looking at her, Madeline knew the darkness of the last 2 years had finally been broken. Dominic Vane sat on a metal bench in a federal holding cell. His bespoke Brioni suit was wrinkled, the fabric dull under the grim security lights. His tie had been confiscated, leaving his collar open and vulnerable. The heavy steel door clanked open, echoing with a finality that made his stomach turn. His high-priced defense attorney walked in, but he didn't sit down. He didn't open his briefcase. He just looked at Dominic with a resigned expression of a man who knows the war is lost. "The senator cut a deal, Dominic," the lawyer said, his voice flat. "To save his own skin, St. Clair handed over everything. The recordings, the ledgers, the dates of the wire transfers, they have the shell company." Dominic stared at the concrete floor. "So, what does that mean?" "It means it's not just a fine," the lawyer replied, stepping back as if Dominic were contagious. "The DA is filing for a federal indictment. Bribery, wire fraud, conspiracy. You're looking at 15 to 20 years. Dominic closed his eyes. In the silence of the cell, he didn't hear the roar of the city he used to rule. He heard the phantom sound of a gavel coming down. The king of real estate had no castle left. The 5 years later. 5 years later. New York City moved on. It was a beast that never mourned. It simply shed its skin and grew a new layer. The skyline had changed, jagged teeth of glass and steel biting into the clouds where open sky used to be. The Vane Tower in Hudson Yards, once the crown jewel of Dominic's ambition, had been rebranded. It was now the Montgomery Center, a hub for sustainable tech startups, bustling with young visionaries who had never heard the name Dominic Vane. It was a crisp, golden October afternoon in Central Park. The leaves were turning violent shades of orange and russet, carpeting the ground in crunchy confetti. The air smelled of roasted nuts and wood smoke. Madeline sat on a checkered cashmere blanket near the edge of the sheep meadow. At 32, she was radiant. The softness of her youth had hardened into a polished, confident elegance. She wore a camel trench coat over jeans, her hair loose and shining in the autumn sun. She was no longer just a curator. She was the owner of Reeves and Associates, the city's most influential art consultancy. "Mom!" "Watch me. Watch." 5-year-old Elena was attempting a cartwheel in the grass. Her legs flailed adorably in the air, her form terrible, but her enthusiasm perfect. "I see you, Ellie." "Perfect form," Madeline cheered, clapping her hands. Lucas sat beside her, leaning back on his elbows, reading a worn paperback. His hair had developed a distinguished touch of grey at the temples, lending him an air of statesmanlike calm. He marked his page and wrapped an arm around Madeline's waist, pulling her closer. "She's going to be a gymnast," Lucas murmured, watching Elena tumble into a pile of leaves. "I can feel it. We're going to spend a fortune on leotards and lessons." Madeline laughed, a rich, full sound that vibrated against his chest. "Better that than a corporate rate," agreed. Lucas kissed her temple. "Much safer." The peace of the afternoon was so complete it felt fragile, and then a shadow fell over their blanket, blocking the sun. Madeline squinted, shielding her eyes with her hand. A man stood there, blocking the path. He was thin-gaunt, actually. His cheekbones protruded sharply against papery skin that looked grey even in the sunlight. He wore a nondescript, cheap windbreaker and jeans that were fraying at the hems. In his hand, he held a paper coffee cup from a bodega, the kind that cost $1, not the crystal tumblers of scotch he used to nurse. It took Madeline 3 full seconds to reconcile the image before her with the memory in her mind. Dominic. She breathed, the name involuntary. Dominic Vane looked at them. He looked at the expensive blanket, the glowing woman, the husband who looked at her with adoration. And then his gaze drifted to the little girl spinning in the grass, oblivious to the ghosts of the past. He had been released 3 months ago. Good behavior, overcrowding. But he wasn't free. He was a felon. He couldn't sit on a board. He couldn't run a public company. His personal assets had been seized to pay millions in restitution. He lived in a studio apartment in Queens now, working as a shadow consultant for a shady mid-level developer who paid him in cash under the table. "She looks like you," Dominic said. His voice was raspy, unused. He hadn't spoken to them or anyone of consequence in 5 years. "She has Lucas's nose," Madeline said instinctively, sitting up straighter. Her hand went to Lucas's knee, a silent signal. "What do you want, Dominic?" "I don't want anything," Dominic said, shifting his weight. He sounded tired. The arrogance that had once fueled him, the fire that burned everyone who got too close, was gone. It had been suffocated by the humiliation of prison. I walk through the park on Sundays. It's free." "I saw you." He looked at Lucas. There was no hatred left in his eyes, only a hollow, aching envy. "You won, Montgomery. You played the long game." "I wasn't playing a game, Dominic," Lucas said quietly, not rising to the bait. He didn't stand up. He didn't feel the need to intimidate a man who had already defeated himself. "I was living a life. You should try it." Dominic let out a bitter, dry laugh. "A bit late for that, isn't it?" Suddenly a ball rolled across the grass, bumping gently against Dominic's worn sneakers. A bright red soccer ball. "Hey, can you kick it back?" A little boy came running up to Dominic. He was about 4 years old, full of kinetic energy. He had sandy blonde hair and piercing, intelligent blue eyes. He was dressed in a sharp little navy peacoat and leather loafers that looked expensive, far more expensive than anything Dominic was currently wearing. Dominic looked down at the boy. He froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The eyes, the set of the jaw, the impatient, commanding way the boy stood with his hands on his hips, waiting for the ball. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected 40 years into the past. It was undeniable. It was biological fact staring him in the face. "Leo, don't run off like that!" A woman came rushing up the path behind the boy. She was glamorous, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and a silk Hermes scarf tied effortlessly around her neck. She looked like Paris personified chic, wealthy and utterly independent. It was Tiffany St. Clair. She reached the boy and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. Then she looked up. She saw Madeline. She saw Lucas. And then she saw the man standing over her son. Tiffany took off her sunglasses slowly. She didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She looked from Dominic to the little boy and then back to Dominic, her expression unreadable. The silence was deafening. The ambient noise of Central Park, the laughter, the distant traffic seemed to vanish, leaving only the sound of Dominic's heart hammering against his ribs. Dominic stared at the boy. Leo. Tiffany had left for Paris 5 years ago. Pregnant. The timeline was exact. Is he? Dominic started, his voice trembling, cracking under the weight of the realization. He took a hesitant step toward the child, his hand reaching out. Tiffany, is he? Tiffany stepped in front of the boy, shielding him with her body. Her face was hard, etched with the strength of a single mother who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of a public scandal. She wasn't the scared girl in a powder room anymore. Come on, Leo, Tiffany said sharply, turning her back on Dominic. We're leaving. Tiffany, wait. Dominic pleaded, a desperation rising in his chest that he hadn't felt since the night at Le Bernardin. He's 4, look at him. He's 4, look at him. He's mine, isn't he? Tiffany stopped. She turned back slowly to look at the man who had treated her like a zoning permit, the man who had planned to discard her and her child for a merger. He's my son, Dominic, Tiffany said, her voice ice cold, sharp enough to cut glass. His name is Leo St. Clair, and he doesn't have a father. His father died 5 years ago in a boardroom, chasing a deal that didn't matter. I have a right. Dominic stepped forward, his voice rising. I am his biological father. You can't just. I can, Tiffany hissed, stepping closer, her eyes blazing with a ferocity that made Dominic recoil. You have nothing. Do you remember the settlement you made me sign before I left? The one your lawyers drafted to ensure you had no liabilities. Dominic paled. He remembered. He had been so terrified of a scandal ruining the IPO that he had demanded a total severance of rights in exchange for the payoff. You wanted a clean break, Tiffany reminded him, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. You wanted to be free of encumbrances. Well, congratulations, Dominic. You got exactly what you negotiated. You are liability-free. She turned to the boy, her face softening instantly into a mask of maternal love. Let's go get gelato, Leo. The chocolate kind you like. Okay, Mummy. The boy chirped, grabbing her hand and skipping away. He didn't even look back at the gaunt man in the grey jacket. He didn't know he was walking away from his legacy. Dominic stood paralyzed. He watched them walk away down the winding path. He watched his son, his flesh and blood, the heir he had destroyed his life to secure disappear into the crowd, holding the hand of the woman he had underestimated. He was trembling. He turned back to the blanket. Madeline was watching him. She didn't look angry anymore. She didn't look triumphant. She looked sad. It was a pitying, profound sadness that hurt worse than any insult. You have a son, Madeline said softly. I have a son, Dominic repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. And he'll never know my name. That was your choice, Dom, Madeline said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just the truth, laid bare. You chose the buildings. You chose the money. You thought people were disposable assets. But you forgot that assets can walk away. Dominic looked up at the skyline of New York. The buildings he had built were still there, gleaming aggressively in the sun. They were tall, impressive, and permanent. But they were cold. They were empty of love. They couldn't hold his hand when he died. He looked at Madeline and Lucas, holding their daughter, wrapped in warmth. He looked at the empty path where his son had vanished. He was a billionaire in spirit, perhaps. But standing there in the park, he was the poorest man in the city. Goodbye, Madeline, Dominic whispered. He turned and walked away, His shoulders slumped, disappearing into the crowd of strangers. He was a ghost haunting a life he had been too cowardly to claim. Madeline watched him go until he was just a grey speck in the distance. Then she felt a small, warm hand tugging on her sleeve. "Mommy, who was that sad man?" Elena asked, her big eyes wide with curiosity. Madeline looked at Lucas. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise that their future was safe. "Just someone I used to know," Madeline said softly, leaning down to kiss her daughter's forehead, inhaling the scent of sunshine and grass. "Now show me that cartwheel again. I think you almost had it." As Elena spun in the grass, laughing, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the skyscrapers, but bathing the family in the park in warm, golden light. So, what is the true cost of ambition? Dominic Vane thought he could trade love for leverage, but he learned the hard way that in the ledger of life, people are the only assets that truly appreciate. He built an empire of glass and steel, but ended up watching his real legacy, his son, and the love of his life walk away with other people. It's a brutal reminder: be careful what you sacrifice for success, because you might just get exactly what you paid for and nothing more. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal, redemption, and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Dominic deserved a second chance with his son, or was Tiffany right to keep him away? I'll be reading your replies. Thanks for watching.